back everybody, and we are going to do a tomato review on this tomato right here, and this is called the Guajito. I believe that's how you say it. It's in Spanish or something to that nature. But here it is, and let's take a closer look at the tomato. Okay, they kind of look like this. It's like a very strange shaped plum tomato, almost between a plum, preiform, and or pear-shaped tomato. There's another one. Again, you get that pear shape to it, but yet it kind of looks like a plum or preiform. Beautiful little tomato. I'm quite impressed with its shape. Here's one that's not so ripe. Okay, we're picking them up as they fall too. You know, a lot of them are falling to the ground. The storms are coming through and they just knock the tomatoes off the ground, which unfortunately, you know, I showed you all of those. Here's a little one. Right, they're a pretty cool tomato. Pretty cool shape on those. Yeah, I'll show you the inside and then we'll weigh it. Alright, let's give you a look at the inside. Right. Here's the other side. You can see it's a hollow tomato, guys. So this is falling into the paste type tomatoes or hollow tomatoes. That's really what this is. Even though it has that pear shape to it, it's really a hollow tomato. So let's throw a couple of these on the scale and get an idea what the weight could possibly be here. Alright, she's zeroed out. Let's put one on there. That's 1.3 ounces, 1.2 ounces, 0.9 ounces. Here's a little bigger one. 1 ounce, and we'll pick the little one there, and 0.7. So you see they got a range. They can range from roughly 3/4 of an ounce, let's say, all the way up as high as 1.5 ounces. I don't think you'll even see 2 ounces, but they might get to 2 ounces. But in general, this is what you see here. It's not much bigger than a large, you know, cherry pear tomato if you want. So, and it is a hollow tomato, so you're not going to get that much weight in it. It's kind of going to probably be on the dry side. But let's go over there and do a bricks. And the bricks will always give you the numbers you are looking for when it comes to whether you're going to get sweetness or what. Okay, it's a 6 on the bricks. That's actually really good for a tomato like this. It's a little above average. 5 has been averaging so far this year. So this is 6 on the bricks. So let's give that a go with one we squeezed and see what that tastes like. I'm impressed. I'm a little surprised. I thought it was going to be a dry experience because if tomato, you know, paste tomatoes are generally on the dry side, so you don't normally want to eat those kind of on the fresh side. But let me tell you something. This thing's pretty rich in flavor. It's not dry. We'll give you a little cheater there before we break out our chart. Right out the gate, sweetness was slightly above average. Very slightly. I'll probably go with probably a 26 on the sweetness. Average would have been 25. So you're about a 26 on the sweetness. The tangy side was a lot higher, so I'm going to put that at about a 31, 32 on the tangy. So it was a lot higher. But the type of tanginess it was very smooth. It wasn't like bittery or acidy, which we'll get into that in the tardy section. But the tomato flavor was pretty nice as well. It was pretty dominant inside this tomato. Again, when I talk about tomato flavor, we're talking about the concentration of it. How present was that flavor altogether in this whole profile? So when we talk about tomato flavor, we're talking about the concentration of it. So the intensity of that flavor, I'm probably going to put at about a 7. It was a little bit above average. And it was really a nice flavor, to be honest with you. It had a very nice flavor. It really paired together really well with the tangy and the sweet. It really had a nice uh, it was like a bridge between the tangy and the sweet. It just brought it all together, delivered it to the back of your tongue, and it was really terrific. The flavor was just right. It was a nice concentration of it, though the sweet flavor wasn't terribly high. And a tomato like this variety, you don't want a high sweetened flavor just because of the type of other flavors and tomato flavors and everything it had. Now we're going over to moisture. Moisture was, I'm probably going to put that, I'm going to put that at about a 6.5. It was actually perfect. It wasn't sopping wet, but when you squeezed it and you were ready to break it up, all the juice started coming out of it. So it really stored the moisture within the cell walls of the flesh of the tomato and the placenta of the tomato. Really, really stored that moisture well. Plus the seeds have its own moisture, and the seeds are more tangy. Just so you know that they're going to carry more of that tangy flavor. But if you remove most of the seeds, the tomato tangy was good by itself. But the moisture part, I'm going to put that at about a 7 on the moisture. The ideal, what did I say, 6.5? No, I'm going to put this at 6.5, not 7. This is going to be 6.5 on the moisture. And the reason why is the way it held that moisture within the flesh walls. A lot of times tomatoes will just release that moisture from the flesh walls, and it's just a big wet mess. And this wasn't like that. It held all that moisture very, very well within the walls, and then when you chewed it up, all this moisture came rushing out. It was like eating a perfectly ripened peach, for example. Not flavor-wise, but texture-wise, the moisture-wise from a really well-ripened peach. So we're going to put the moisture at 6.5. It was perfect as far as the moisture went. Tarty and sour. There may have been a little bit of tardiness there, but really not enough to really affect that bottom part of my jaw. So I didn't really get that I don't know, weird cramping feeling I get in the back of my jaw when I eat something really tardy. So I didn't really pick up a lot of tardiness, but there may have been a little bit of something in there, and it was very low. So I'd probably put that below 1, whatever you want to consider that. It was below 1 on the tardy, was rather low, but there was a little something, and it went really well with the tangy. It just really worked together very well. I only separate this because of that effect that I get on my jaw. I really looked for that. I've really trained myself to really look for all these little things when you're eating all these varieties, and some varieties of tomatoes really do affect that area, and that's why I had to include this in there, because sometimes some tomatoes have it and some just don't, period. So, but it's nice when all tomatoes have a little bit of that. So for example, once you eat a tomato that's very tardy or tangy, very high, and you get that effect in the back of your jaw, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. And then you'll know what to look for when you eat other tomatoes. You'll start to look for that little tingly almost by the back of your bone in your jaw. So it's a little funny little feeling, but I included it anyway. So yeah, there was a little something there. Now undertones, I didn't really get any undertones, but there may have been a slight something there. So with undertones, I'm probably going to put it something below 1. You want to go 0.5, 0.37, whatever. Is something below 1. There was a little something, but it wasn't bad, and it was really hard to detect, but I'm capable of like noticing it, and there was a little tiny something there. So there was a little tiny undertone there, which was fine. It didn't hurt the flavor of the tomato or anything. When we're talking about texture now, we're talking about the way the tomato flesh is. Mostly the flesh. Well, the placenta a lot of times, or the center part of the flesh. We're not talking about the seed gel or anything, or the skins. We're talking specifically about the flesh here, and I separated the skins from my last videos with that included in there, because it was really screwing up the way I was, judging tomatoes. But when we talk about texture, we're talking about flesh. Some tomatoes tend to be kind of dry, chalky, and somewhat grainy in effect, and that effect is just, it's unpalatable to me, and the higher that effect is, the more unpalatable that tomato is. So when I talk about texture, and I'm rating a tomato by texture and it being very high, say a 10, that means that tomato was, the flesh was very nice. It wasn't chalky, wasn't grainy, wasn't dry, and it wasn't smushy or mushy. Like it just didn't have like a creamy effect in your mouth. And that's another thing I just don't like about some tomatoes, and I do get that once in a while. So with this particular tomato, when we're talking about texture, we're talking about that wall holding in that moisture very well, and then at the point where you chewed it, that's where all the moisture was released. Because of that reason, I have to rate this tomato semi high on the texture scale because it was a very interesting and delicious effect, because it could remain solid like that, like in a salad or a soup or something like that. It'll remain solid to the point where you chew it, and that's where the moisture comes out. That's a very, very high texture rating in my book. I'm going to put that at about a 7.5 on the texture because of that ability to hold that moisture in it and then release it when you chewed it. So 7.5 on the texture. Production wise, it was very productive. This plant was overproduction, and it produced so many tomatoes. I'm not even sure what I'm going to do because a lot of them are still green on the plant, but the plants are all starting to die now because it's getting later in the season. So they're starting to die, but they're still all green. And so I guess I just bring them in and maybe let them, ripen in the garage or something throughout the next month, because they really take a long time to ripen this time of the year. But as far as production, I'm going to put production as well. I'm going to put that up at about a 7.5 on the production because it was such a good producer of really good sized tomatoes like you see here. These are very nice sized tomatoes. That's well above the average size of a cherry tomato. For example, there's the cherry pear tomato. That's a larger size cherry pear tomato. And you can see these are very much larger. These are more like plum tomatoes, but they're not quite a full-size plum. It's a very strange shape, but it's a great producer, and definitely going to have to keep that at least 7.5. I'm sure next year I might raise that number if I review it again, because I think I'm going to get more production out of it. Because next year I'm going to be starting my tomato plants much, much earlier. I didn't start my tomato plants this year until mid-May. So I really got screwed on production on a lot of my varieties because I started so late. You really got to get them started in March or April, and then you're going to see tomatoes like you've never seen before, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about skins. I actually separated skins from texture. At one point I was including it. Now I separated the skins, and we're going to talk about the thickness of the skins. And when I refer to the thickness of the skins and how the skins are when you're eating the tomato is what we're referring to. That's how I'm rating it. So do the skins stick to the roof of my mouth? Do they get stuck on my teeth or by my gums? Do they break up really nice with the tomato as I'm eating it? So that's what we're looking for. In this particular case, this tomato broke up very nice. It didn't really get stuck on the roof of my mouth or anything, though maybe one piece did, but that's just the one piece out of that tomato. But in general, the whole skin broke up very nicely with the flesh of the tomato. It was a very nice, palatable experience as far as the skin goes. And so I'm going to rate that skin a little bit above average. And when we're talking about skins, we're only going to 5 on that. And basically, we're talking about skins. We're going to be a little above average. We'll probably go about 3 on the skins, and that's pretty good for a tomato to be up and above that area. So, yeah, we're going up for a 3 on the skins of this variety of tomato. Now, talk about seeds. I added this to it because some people might want to grow tomatoes for seeds, and so let's talk about seeds. Some tomatoes are more seedless varieties like Bull's Hearts and Bull's Heart type tomatoes. Those type of tomatoes tend to be very fleshy and very little seed. And some tomatoes like currant tomatoes or even cherry tomatoes tend to be extremely seedy. It's almost all seeds. So that's what we're rating it on. How much seed is coming out of each tomato? Not to say your whole harvest, but per tomato. Is it a very seedy variety of tomato, or is it not a seedy variety of tomato? And that's what this rating is for. This tomato is going to be about average. It's about the middle of the road type of seediness. So we're going to go for seeds. We're going to go at about a 5 on the seeds. And it's a good tomato to grow if you're looking to maybe save some seed for the following year. So it's a good seed variety tomato, but it's not above average and it's not below average. It's right in the middle, and you could either cook with those seeds or you can just remove them and save them for the following year. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the overall rating. How do I rate this tomato from 1 to 10? 1 obviously being the highest. This particular tomato, I'm going to rate actually pretty high. I'm going to rate this one at about a 2. I think it's a great producer. All these other factors really caused me to really rate this tomato higher. There's really not a lot about this tomato that I didn't like. I didn't really like the fact that it was kind of hollow. That's for a fresh eating tomato. I'm just not a big fan of hollow tomatoes for eating fresh. I don't mind cooking and making sauce or putting them on a barbecue grill and stuffing them with meat or something like that. But generally not a big fan of eating raw hollow tomatoes. But for a hollow tomato, this tomato was very rich in flavor. It really activated my saliva glands, and it just really hit a lot of good flavor zones on my tongue. So I'm very impressed with this tomato. This is actually a USDA recorded inventoried tomato variety, so it's not like some junk variety. This tomato actually has a PI number, plant inventory number. So it does have some history behind it and some other things. Here's a rounder one. Here's one with 3 lobes. And so it's got some stuff behind it. It's just a great tomato altogether. I mean, there's really nothing about this tomato I can actually complain about. It's a fantastic tomato. I'm going to grow this out next year. I think I'm going to find a spot in my yard where I'm just going to let it grow wild, basically. Just plant it, let it grow, and let it do its thing, and just let it sprawl everywhere and make as many tomatoes as it can. That's usually the best way to grow these type of tomatoes, just let them sprawl. And we'll see how it grows and see if there's any changes from now to next year. But it's a great tomato. I will definitely, I'll bring you up to date. Maybe next year we'll do another review on it. All right? So I'll leave whatever information I have on this tomato in the description below and on my website. I will also leave a link in the description below where you could buy the seed for this tomato if it's something you decide that you want to grow for yourself and give it a try. All right? So that's it, guys. That was my tomato review for the Guajito Tomato. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you on the next one. Take care.